The story begins as Paul tells his older brother Elliot that he has had a frightening dream. In the dream, Earth's natural resources suddenly vanished. Soon afterward, a mysterious red planet appeared in the sky. People later named it the Red Moon and used its unusual energy for years to keep civilization alive. Eventually, however, the planet started moving closer to Earth, surrounded by an impenetrable magnetic field. The object that once helped humanity survive became its greatest threat. Paul's dream showed one more event. He saw that a single person would have the power to stop the Red Moon, but that person would disappear before saving the world. Years later, Paris has been transformed into a lifeless wasteland. The city has lost everything that once made it vibrant. Dust covers the streets, the sky appears dark and unhealthy, and the people spend their remaining days waiting for the end rather than looking toward the future. The massive red moon fills the horizon above the ruins. It has moved so close to Earth that its gravitational pull is beginning to affect the planet. If the situation continues, both worlds will eventually be destroyed. Paul runs through the ruined landscape alone. He is exhausted, frightened, and constantly looking over his shoulder. As he moves, he hears the voice of a child in his mind, encouraging him to keep going and push past his fear. The voice is not coming from anyone nearby. It exists only inside his head. After some time, Paul arrives near a settlement built outside a heavily protected government city. Following the collapse of Earth's resources, conflicts spread across the world. In response, governments created fortified cities for selected survivors, while many others were forced to live in harsh desert camps beyond the walls. Military forces are present everywhere. Armed troops guard checkpoints, and drones patrol the skies while watching the population. Because the authorities are searching for him, Paul avoids attention and moves carefully through the crowds. To him, every camera and patrol represents another threat. Needing transportation, Paul approaches a man who agrees to help him. After discussing a deal, the man leads him to a vehicle lot and sells him a floating car, a common form of transport in a future where traditional wheeled vehicles have largely disappeared. The vehicles of this era travel without wheels, floating above the ground through electromagnetic power systems. As Paul completes the purchase, a military drone suddenly approaches and scans him. This creates a serious problem because Paul is one of the most wanted people in the world. He is the missing astronaut the authorities have been searching for over the last 4 years. Years earlier, Paul's father, Henry, was a renowned scientist who discovered how to harness the Red Moon's energy. His breakthrough gave humanity a temporary chance to survive after Earth's resources began disappearing. For a short time, people believed the crisis could be overcome. Later, Henry realized the Red Moon was steadily moving closer to Earth and would eventually destroy everything. Determined to stop the disaster, he developed a mission to eliminate it. Multiple probes and machines were sent toward the planet, but none could withstand its powerful magnetic field. Henry chose his own son to carry out the mission. However, Paul never boarded the spacecraft. Before the launch could take place, he disappeared. He refused to take part because he did not believe the Red Moon was merely an object in space. He was convinced it was a living, conscious presence that had been communicating with him and revealing things beyond human understanding. Despite his claims, no one accepted his story. To the government, Paul was not a person they needed to protect, but a vital asset that had escaped. Now, he lives in hiding, moving through the wastelands while the authorities continue searching for him. After purchasing the floating car, Paul leaves the settlement and heads into the desert. Before long, the vehicle suddenly stops working. He realizes the seller had deceived him because the power cell is almost completely drained. At the same time, the drone that scanned him returns to verify his identity. Before it can send a clear image of him to the authorities, Paul shoots it down. With the vehicle no longer functioning, he is forced to push it across the wasteland until he reaches a small repair shop. The shop is run by a girl named Elma, a cautious and experienced survivor. She tells him that the battery must be replaced entirely. Although she can obtain a new one, she explains that it will take at least 3 days. Paul insists that he cannot afford to wait that long, but Elma makes it clear that replacement parts are extremely scarce. Without one, there is no way to get the vehicle moving again. As Paul remains at the shop, a news report appears on a broadcast. Around the world, people watch as humanity's final plan is put into action. The United Nations has approved the Aurora mission, a last effort to reach the Red Moon and destroy it. The astronaut selected for the mission is Elliot, Paul's older brother. After Paul's disappearance, Henry placed all his hopes on Elliot's success. Paul watches silently as the spacecraft launches and begins its journey toward the Red Moon. For a brief moment, it seems possible that humanity may still have a chance to save itself. When the Aurora reaches the Red Moon, it enters the magnetic field and quickly loses stability. Control is lost. Communication is cut off and all systems fail. The signal disappears completely, and the screens on Earth go dark. Humanity's final mission is lost without any confirmation of survival. No one knows what happened to Elliot after the failure. The Red Moon continues its slow approach toward Earth. On the ground, Paul leaves Elma's shop in a dazed and empty state. Before he goes, Elma gives him a small pin marked with a simple hand-drawn smiley face. As he moves through the wasteland alone, memories begin to return. He thinks about his mother's illness and how she suffered. He recalls how his father became obsessed with the Red Moon, believing its energy could be used to save her life. He also remembers his relationship with Elliot and how different he always felt, as if he saw the world in a way others could not understand. Paul often experienced strange visions that felt like sudden flashes of truth, and he would hear voices that no one else could hear. One recurring vision stayed with him, a vivid image of a living green forest. Something impossible, in a world where most plant and animal life had already disappeared. Despite this, Paul believed the forest was real and connected to the Red Moon in some way, as though it were protecting or preserving it. Because of this belief, Paul tried to stop Henry when he decided to destroy the Red Moon. He warned that eliminating it might not save humanity, but instead erase its last remaining hope. Henry refused to listen and continued with his plan anyway. Elliot, who always believed in order and logic, had never trusted Paul. He viewed his younger brother as unstable, weak, and unreliable, someone who could not be depended upon. With the failure of the Aurora mission and Elliot's disappearance, that judgment no longer matters, and the world is left without its final officially recognized hope. As a result, people everywhere begin to accept that the end is approaching. At the repair shop, Elma hears the news broadcast. When she sees Paul's image on the screen, she realizes the quiet man who brought in the broken vehicle is actually Paul W.R., the missing astronaut. She understands that he may be the only one who can still change what is coming. She takes a weapon and prepares to go after him. Before she leaves, her father arrives and tries to speak to her, apologizing for the past violence and the damage that drove her mother away and destroyed their family. Elma does not respond and chooses to leave without speaking to him. She steps into the wasteland, determined to find Paul before the military reaches him. At the same time, far away in an abandoned zone, two children are playing when an object suddenly falls from the sky nearby. They run toward the crash site. A damaged space pod is found partly buried in the ground. Inside, a man is barely alive, and it turns out to be Elliot. He has somehow survived the crash. Elma eventually locates Paul in a field of destroyed vehicles, where he is searching through the wreckage with injured, bleeding hands, trying to find a usable power cell. Elma approaches and tells him she knows who he is, then offers to go with him. Paul immediately rejects her and warns that anyone who stays close to him will be harmed, telling her to leave. Elliot is then taken to a secured facility, where he is reunited with Henry. He tries to apologize for the failed mission, but Henry is no longer interested in excuses. Instead, he is disturbed by what Elliot has become. After passing through the Red Moon's magnetic field, Elliot's body was completely altered. He was clinically dead for hours, but his body returned with its structure changed at a cellular level. It appears that the Red Moon transformed him in a deliberate way, rather than simply damaging him. Meanwhile, in the desert, Paul struggles once again with his disabled vehicle while Elma observes from a distance. Soldiers arrive soon after. Paul is forced into another confrontation and manages to escape once more. That same evening, Elma returns to her trailer and finds it destroyed by fire. Her father is responsible, having burned everything she owned. With her only remaining shelter gone, she is left completely devastated. He stands nearby without showing any remorse. The following day, Elliot arrives in the area after receiving a report about Paul's location. He intends to capture Paul and force him back into the mission. On his way, he encounters Elma's father and questions him. However, Elliot is no longer the same person who left Earth. The Red Moon has changed him in a disturbing way. Elliot has developed an ability that allows him to invade other people's minds. He can pull out their deepest guilt and turn it against them, forcing them to confront everything they try to hide. This power makes him less human and more like a living judgment. When he uses this ability on Elma's father, he exposes the violence and cruelty buried within him. Seeing no value in him, Elliot forces the man to take his own life. Elma witnesses the act and breaks down in shock and grief. Nearby, Paul takes advantage of the confusion. He slips into Elliot's vehicle and steals its battery. As he prepares to leave, he notices Elma in distress and decides not to abandon her. He pulls her into the car and they escape together. During the drive, Elma tries to justify staying with him, explaining that being alone makes Paul an easy target, while being seen as a pair may help them blend in. Paul resists the idea but ultimately allows her to remain with him. Elma claims she is searching for her mother, who disappeared years earlier after fleeing the violence. Later, she admits she is not certain whether her mother is still alive. She also reveals a darker truth, that she once betrayed Paul by turning him in for a reward, hoping the money would give her a way out and a better life. While traveling with Paul, Elma gradually changes her view of him. Instead of seeing him as a wanted fugitive, she begins to feel a need to protect him. Paul, however, remains focused on his goal of finding the forest he saw in his childhood visions, a place that should not exist in the ruined world. They arrive at a military checkpoint where Paul's identity is easily recognized. To avoid detection, Elma takes control of the vehicle and drives through calmly, acting normal and unthreatening. Her behavior allows them to pass without being stopped. Later, they stop at an abandoned roadside diner. Inside, Paul finds an old wired telephone and calls Henry. He confronts him about sending Elliot, even though he knew he had no chance of surviving. He then tries to explain that the Red Moon is not just a danger, but part of a larger system tied to life itself. Henry refuses to accept this and starts to tell him his regret of not making a medicine that would cure his mother. Before the conversation can continue, soldiers storm the diner. One of them is heavily armored and extremely strong, and he quickly overwhelms Paul. Paul is badly beaten and appears to be defeated. Elma creates a brief distraction, allowing Paul to recover enough to strike the soldier and escape. They flee the diner together, but Elma is left shaken by the violence she has just witnessed and by how easily everything escalated. Meanwhile, they are still being tracked. Elliot has secretly sent a small spider-like surveillance device to follow their vehicle, which continues to follow them and transmit their location back to him. On the road, Paul tells Elma that he has been seeing visions of the future since he was a child. He explains that he once tried to warn Henry, but his father refused to believe him, and every warning was dismissed as instability by those around him. To reduce the chance of Paul being recognized, Elma alters his hair color. At the diner, Elliot arrives and questions the woman who manages the place. Using his ability to enter her thoughts, he discovers that she killed her husband. He treats her guilt as final judgment and forces her to take her own life before continuing his search. Soon enough, Elliot gets behind them as Paul and Elma continue driving until they enter a severe storm filled with lightning, dust, and violent winds. During the chaos, Paul discovers the spider-like tracking device hidden in the vehicle and destroys it, causing Elliot to lose their location. They move through the storm until they reach an abandoned building that once served as a theater. Inside, a holographic system still projects images of Earth as it used to be, showing living forests, oceans, and animals that no longer exist. They watch in silence, taking in the remnants of a lost world. Elma asks Paul if he has ever experienced rain. He recalls that he has, describing it as something gentle and calming, almost unreal compared to the harshness of the present world. The display changes, and Paul suddenly stops. It shows a forest that matches exactly what he has seen in his visions since childhood. He walks closer, but it turns out to be only a recorded projection made of light and data. The forest is not real. It is just an archived image from a long-gone Earth. Realizing this, Paul is deeply shaken. He begins to question everything he has believed. He considers the possibility that his visions were false and that Henry may have been right all along. Elma tries to calm him, but his frustration and confusion cause him to push her away. Soon after, Elliot arrives with soldiers. Paul and Elma quickly attempt a plan where Paul pretends to hold Elma hostage in order to escape. However, Elliot immediately sees through it, and one of the soldiers shoots her without hesitation, severely injuring Elma. Paul grabs her and runs while Elliot continues to pursue them through the storm. Despite her injuries, Elma adjusts their vehicle to help it gain altitude and make it fly. Soon after, Elliot collides with them, causing both vehicles to crash. In the wreckage, Paul and Elliot face each other directly for the first time in a long while. They stand face to face and begin to talk. Elliot uses his mental ability against Paul, forcing his thoughts towards self-destruction. As Paul struggles under the pressure, he begins to hear Elma's voice breaking through the mental attack. The connection to Elliot is broken at the last moment as Paul manages to resist and overcomes him, ending Elliot's life. Paul then carries Elma to safety, where she is still barely alive. Before leaving her, he gives her his childhood drawing book, filled with sketches of the visions he has had since he was young. After this, Paul stops trying to escape. When soldiers arrive, he surrenders and is taken into custody. He is brought to Henry and agrees to proceed with the mission, but only if Elma receives medical treatment. Henry accepts the condition. Some days later, Paul is inside a launch vehicle as it rises into space. Meanwhile, Elma slowly recovers and discovers the drawing book hidden in her jacket. As she looks through it, she realizes the sketches are not random drawings but a sequence of events that reflect both past and future moments. In space, Paul approaches the red moon and understands its true nature. He comes to believe it is not an enemy, but part of Earth's natural balance, reacting to how humanity has treated it. According to his understanding, when humans tried to control or destroy it, the red moon responded by moving closer, as if reflecting their actions. Paul enters the magnetic field carrying nuclear warheads, with the rest of humanity believing he's about to carry out the final strike. Paul ultimately chooses not to follow the mission's orders. He understands the red moon has always been responding to human actions rather than acting on its own. Taking full control of the spacecraft, he shuts down all communication and redirects the mission away from its intended path. He then triggers a self-destruction of the rocket in space. Paul dies in the explosion, choosing to end the cycle of violence rather than continue it. His action becomes a final sacrifice instead of an attack. On Earth, Elma witnesses the blast lighting up the sky and collapses in grief. After this, the red moon begins to withdraw slowly, moving away from Earth instead of approaching it. The crisis starts to reverse. Elma returns to Paul's drawing book and finds its last page, which shows her standing in rainfall. As she holds it, she understands it as a confirmation that Paul was not mistaken, only ahead of everyone else in understanding what was happening. Soon after, she stands there holding an umbrella as she looks up at the sky.